Hi, my name is Alice Dawes and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the learning disability of dysgraphia today. Before we do that though, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about why I decided to choose dysgraphia for my learning disability. So I have just been on placement and I noticed a student in one of my Year 9 humanities classes. It was a student called Ben. That's a pseudonym. But as I was walking around the class, I realised that Ben's table had scraps of paper everywhere. There were cables for computers, there was stationery. His folder was a huge jumble. And as I got closer, most of the other students were getting on with the assignment that I had asked them to do. But Ben, as I came closer, tried to hide what he was doing and tried to hide his handwriting, and he was gripping the pencil with a really kind of awkward grip. And as I got closer, I realised that Ben's writing looked as though a spider had dipped its legs in ink and was scuttling across his page. The script itself wasn't illegible. I could make out most of what he was writing, and I could guess most of the words, but the script itself was literally all over the page. There was no horizontal line that underscored his work, and each letter seemed to be written a little bit like sheet music. Ben's spelling was also pretty poor. My first thoughts were that Ben was dyslexic. But he was able to spell really quite well, and so it was because of that I did a little bit more research and decided that it was actually the writing process itself that was really quite difficult for Ben. So I'm going to show you my poster and I'll talk to you a little bit about dysgraphia, but that's a little bit of context just to get started. Okay, so hopefully you can see that there. So the ability to write is integral to a person's effective functioning in society, and when that ability is compromised, then students are at risk of social isolation, decreased enjoyment of life, reduced self-esteem and potential mental illness. And Ben's inability to write clearly in my class put him at a risk of all of these possible outcomes. So let's have a look at dysgraphia. The word dysgraphia comes from the word dys meaning impaired and graphia meaning written by hand. A language communication disability, dysgraphia is a neurological condition that results in difficulties in writing and written expression. And that is one of the troubles with dysgraphia. However, there are multiple definitions. I've just used this one because it's quoted quite a lot in research. So Berninger and May describe dysgraphia as impaired legible automatic letter writing, orthographic coding and finger sequencing. There have also been connections made between the symptoms related to dysgraphic writing and overall organisational ability, which I saw reflected in Ben's organisation of his own work. So what does that mean for us in the classroom as teachers, and what impact will that have on students? So I'll just read a few of the impacts out. So one of them is going to be that illegible, spontaneous and copied writing. So I didn't easily recognise what Ben was writing on the page. He also had an inability to write along lines, poor automaticity. So it took him a long time to write out each individual letter, and he also had difficulty with syntax, structure and grammar as well, even though his spelling was quite good. He also had trouble keeping track of thoughts that he'd already written down, and things were sort of a little bit all over the place. So there are some of the impacts on students. But let's have a look at general evidence-based strategies for teachers and schools and what we can do as teachers in the classroom to really effectively help our students. The first one is ensuring that the classroom environment is emotionally safe and welcomes difference, and that's all part of being an inclusive classroom. So being supportive rather than critical, allowing for and accepting difference, creating opportunities for students to show their talents, allowing space for negotiation, that's an important one, particularly with assessment tasks and activities as well. Using praise for all achievements, however small, and in assessment, considering alternatives such as allowing oral exams and assignments. And also that also ties in quite nicely with allowing ICT in the classroom as well, and we're seeing a lot more of that, particularly in a 21st century school. Considering kinesthetic approaches and tactile materials to assist with the organisation of ideas is a big one, and one of the most widely recognised ways of combating dysgraphia in the classroom is through the ART method that was devised by Dunn, and that's ART. It represents ask, reflect, and text techniques. And those techniques really help students to think about what they're saying with regards to a short story writing, for example, in English or potentially in the humanities, then reflecting on what the task is asking them to do before creating the text, and using artwork to help create that text. And there are also, because of this, there are also challenges in the classroom as well. So the challenges for the teachers are many and varied, but there are a couple that I've written down there. So dysgraphia can be difficult to diagnose. There's no one definition, and even peer-reviewed literature uses different definitions. It also affects 10% of the population. It's more often seen in boys than girls, and I've noticed that in dyslexia as well. Probably more importantly, another challenge is that throughout our schooling as children, we're expected to write every single day, and a lot of the content that we deliver to the students is in a written format, and the content that we require of them through assessment tasks and also in-class work will be in the written form as well. So to go your whole schooling life with this challenge and also having to write every day is a real challenge for these students. And then finally, I just have an example there of dysgraphic text. You can see that this one is all over the place. It's not in any lines. It's very similar to what I saw in Ben's handwriting. And also we have examples of pencil grips, or pen grips there as well, illustrated to the right there. And down the bottom, I have some resources. So resources for students can be the Learning Difficulties Australia, Synapse, Attitude, Understood, and I have the one of the resources that I used in the art technique as well. Something to note while looking at those resources is just be wary that a lot of these resources have been created for a broad spectrum of learning disabilities rather than dysgraphia themselves. So even though they do focus on dysgraphia, they may also cover things like dyslexia, ADHD, or autism spectrum disorder as well. Thank you.